One political analyst believes the ANC's cadre deployment policy has been detrimental to professionalism within state-owned entities. William Gwede argues that the party has always preferred to appoint those who are politically connected, overlooking those who are qualified. He says this has contributed to the overall collapse of the state.
The system, of course, is, as it is now, cadre deployment is working for the ANC members. Of course, it's not working for the country. It's not working for the state. So we'll need lots of political will to turn it around. You know, what it means is you see the recycling of people. You're saying people become, you know, say the CEO of one entity of the other. I mean, Brimo Lefe is one of the examples. It goes from Transnet CEO to Eskom CEO. So through this cadre deployment, we get the same people. So what I do is you recycle incompetency and corruption from one entity to the other, and then you destroy these entities. But maybe, from a bigger point of view, it means that, all the talent in the country, whether black or white, are just marginalized. You'll never, talented people that the country needs will never get opportunity, to be appointed either to senior positions of the state or executive members of state-owned companies and so on. So it means it's an opportunity lost for the society. We are struggling with complex development challenges where we really need the best talent of South Africa, to be in the right places. But if you're not part of that narrow circle of cadres connected, to the ruling party or even to a faction in the ruling party, the talented never get to the positions in the state.
Well, ANC chairperson Gwede Mantashe joins us now, also Minister of Mineral Resources, to talk more on those issues, but also Marikana, 9 years on. Minister, good evening and thank you very much for your time. I guess you're wearing your hat first as the ANC's national chairperson, and we'll get to the work that you're doing in government in a moment. But I want you to just respond to that charge that has been raised there by Professor Gwede on the ANC's recycling tendency, that you don't recognize new talent, but you put on those who have, I suppose, a track record in the organization and who have that kind of long standing.
Now, I would like to invite Professor Gwede to do a desktop research. That's a desktop research. And that desktop research will tell him that in 1994, every DG in the state was a white male. Many of them didn't have a post-matric qualification, but they were in charge of quite a number of departments. The ANC had to intervene to change that and begin to focus on changing demographics in the state and changing gender composition of structures of the state. The results thereof are quite clear today. Because people are not water, others will perform and others will not perform. There will be people who have been performing exceptionally well. There will be people who proven to be disaster. It's like any social science experiment you're conducting. So it is unfair to conduct that. For example, our parliament is among the few parliaments where women have a significant and visible representation. It's a result of the ANC that is insisting that not less than 50% of parliamentarians must be women. So that progress is there to see. Now, it will be unfortunate if Professor Gwede decide to throw the child with the bathwater because there's something that has irritated in the process and not acknowledge the progress made.
Do young people have a political future in leadership, particularly those who are in the ANC, if we're talking government? I'll tell you what, it's reported, and you will respond to this, you intimated to members of parliament that the top six would greatly like to see the former Minister of Defense, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, being appointed to the area of Speaker of the National Assembly. And many are saying, well, where's fresh talent? Why recycle this minister who has been long in that portfolio in any case?
Let me give you two answers to this. I had a discussion with a leader of the interim committee of the Youth League and said, we don't see youth in the cabinet. And I asked him, what is youth? And he said it's 18 to 35. And I asked the question, do you want to have ministers to deploy 24, 25, 26, 27, 830 into the cabinet? She said, yes, what is wrong? And I said, what about graduates who have gone through the preparatory school of youth, who are getting into cabinet, deputy ministers, chairs of committee in parliament? And that debate is going to be open because the Youth League is a preparatory school. Their graduates are many in the cabinet. And I said to her, I've been given a deputy now who is 42 years. He's having a doctorate. So it's not a question of the age. It is the age and competence. And it's deployed as a deputy. There are quite a number of them in the cabinet. We're working with a number of relatively young people who are graduates of the Youth League. Mamluku, who is the Minister of Human Settlement now, you can go to Lamula, Justice, you can go to the Minister of E-Communication and telecommunication, and you go to the Minister of Small Businesses. You can go to a number of them. In the deputies, there are many. It means that there is a graduation from the Youth League into bigger responsibilities. And that's how it should be.
So yes, until they graduate from the Youth League, they will not be holding those responsibilities in
I'm not
cabinet.
saying until. I'm saying they graduate because the Youth League prepares them well. And the deployment is not only to cabinet. Many of them run committees in parliament. Others are whips in parliament. All that is a scope of deployment of young people. I don't say youth, I say young people, because it will be foolhardy of us to think that once you go beyond 35, you must be dumped and be destroyed. I think that will be foolhardy of us. They grow, they do well, they're actually showing energy, and that's it. We will all be phased out as the time comes. Now, let me come to the no-save-way issue. One of the things that is decent about the ANC is that it has no dumping ground for people who are in service. Even if there are tensions, we look into it and say, let's not throw people in the dustbin. Let people phase out properly and in dignity. That is a helpful issue. But people who are spectators will wish us to dump people in the dustbin. It is not a healthy situation for the organization and for the country as well.
There was an expectation, particularly with the performance of the security cluster, with defense being a part of that, and the contradiction that the minister obviously then made in terms of the statements of how she described what has happened, quite contrary to how the president had described that this was a minister, in a sense, that needed to have been reshuffled, but there was no expectation that she would be promoted to national speaker in the National Assembly. Is that the description of decency of the ANC? That those who perform less, they get promoted?
No. What is important is that the president, using his discretion, has tampered with the security cluster. And we're comfortable with that tampering with the security cluster. And then the individual person who is a member of the ANC, a member of the NSC, is proposed to be a candidate. It's not yet a speaker. And the caucus will decide who to nominate, but we said he is a candidate because we understand that the ANC has no dumping ground for its activists. And people must retire properly, phase out, go, and be decent adults where they go. That's it. And the difference between the ANC and many of the parties is that the ANC is not 8-year-old. It is 109, it's going for 110. It has all the generations in the body of the ANC. And we must actually manage the dynamics of those various generations.
Were MPs given an opportunity to ask you questions? I mean, did you get to them and present this as a wish, a desire of the top six that Nosiviwe Mapisa Ngakula be elected in that particular vicinity, and said, okay, but the MPs might make the decision? Did you give them an opportunity to ask you questions?
I had a journalist who said, I instructed MPs to nominate Nosiviwe. And I said to the person who said that journalist was not in that caucus. In that caucus, we say, here is Nosiviwe. You can look at her as a candidate for that position. Okay, as a candidate, that position. That's why the caucus of the ANC will nominate and then go to parliament and elect a speaker.
So other than the fact that you're saying it's the decency of the ANC because there's no dumping ground for people who have served, what is the rationale in the top six for this particular nomination?
The reality of the matter is that somebody, a very respected journalist, asked me that question yesterday. And I said to him, you know, the day we start that discussion, there will be nobody deployed, because when the president says so-and-so is a minister of X, Y, and Z, he will have to say, because Gwede, you are a miner, you worked your way up the industry, therefore you are made the minister of mining. And it will mean that in the future, any other minister who is appointed there will have to explain the reasons for that. And I said, we rather not start that culture because it will make the ANC flat-footed. Actually, all the parties appoint people where they are responsible. Nobody asks them, why is Windy a premier of the Western Cape? Nobody asks them that. What is the logic? And nobody asks them, why is so-and-so holding this position in other parties? And they are asking this question to the ANC because it has become fashionable for anybody who wants to receive attention to insult and attack the ANC.
We continue in a moment with the Minister in the Department of Mineral Resources, Gwede Mantashe, when we ask him now the question around the Marikana debate. Are we beginning to have the full context of that conversation? And is government committed to the development agenda of that mining community? And what have they done in tangible terms to improve the lives of the people of Marikana? We'll come to the ANC's National Chairperson and Minister of Mineral Resources in Government, Gwede Mantashe, and taking your views tonight on 072-110-5584 with the questions for the Minister. Minister, before we get into the story of Marikana, let's talk to the other charge that was put around the destruction of SOEs because of the policy of catered deployment. Any successes in your head that you can think about that have come out of the process of catered deployment, particularly when it comes to the running of our SOEs?
Unfortunately, I'm running 13 of them in the department. Not the major one that are discussed every day. Many of them are vibrant and going on. Go to the Central Energy Fund, is doing well. You go to Strategic Fuel Fund, which has just recovered our strategic stock back into our storages and paid back those who got it in a transaction that was illegal. You can go to iGas, which is participating in gas transformation in Mozambique. There are quite a number of them that are doing well. There are those that are collapsing, of course. For example, we need to revitalize Petro SA in our stable, and we're hard at work. We're going to do that. So it's not all doom and gloom. There are processes that are doing well. There are areas that are actually a disaster.
Now let's get then to Marikana. In 2017, you had said the debate on Marikana should not be politicized. In fact, you had said, if I quote you, the debate in its full context has not started. Has it started in 2021?
I don't know. We'll say it for the first time the government was invited to participate. and I will be a participant in Marikana this year for the first time in 9 years. And I appreciate that because it means there is a change. One of the fundamental changes that can be referred to, Marikana following that disaster almost collapsed and died as a company. Lonmin is no more. Sibanye, Stillwaters has taken over. It is opening areas that were closed. And to me, that is the focus that we should be having. How do we build Marikana moving forward? There's a housing project there that we're getting our heads around it with the Department of Human Settlements. And we want to create space for Marikana to be an example of what should happen in the mining industry. Yeah. Because the industry is doing a number of things that are changing it from being an aloof department, but to a department that is interacting with communities. That's why over the last few weekends, we've ended 2 world-class state-of-art health facilities in Mpumalanga. And we're going to say to Sibanye, it is helpful for you to establish impactful projects in those communities so that our legacy as the mining is not the negative one. We build the future and the positive.
Yeah. Talking about that negative legacy, a question is being asked on Twitter of you, Minister. What lessons have you learned from the Marikana situation in how you handle capital gains that you evaluate vis-a-vis the human and environmental costs? So in other words, what are the practical policies that you have put in place in your tenure as Minister that represent this notion that you serve of course, the mine and the mining project, but also you're looking after the environmental and the human aspect of things?
You know, in the mining charter 2018, one of the things that is the first of its kind is to say there must be carried interest, 5% carried interest for workers and 5% carried interest for communities. That is a change. So that it is not just mining and disappear. Those communities, those workers must benefit from mining activity in those areas. Number 2, they must be involved. When we talk of something called the social labor plan, we talk of the obligation for mining companies to invest in communities where they are mining and in a way pay for their social license in those communities. It is beginning to take good shape, and we're working hard on it. And the department must be such that it is responsive to a change mandate of the department.
As early as March of this year, a campaign or a movement called the Marikana Cluster Crisis Movement is lamenting the mining companies' failure to ensure that they improve the lives of the people in the area as far as jobs and skills development. The community, they're still calling for the mining operations to make sure that in the area of skills and jobs, they do better. How are you holding them accountable to that particular commitment?
You know, it is correct to have a campaigning society. It's nice. But it is also important to ensure that there is responsibility to keep mining companies generating income to meet the demands of those campaigning communities. I don't know if you know that during the COVID, one of the sectors that has not lost a sizable number of jobs is mining. Precisely because we started the COVID in its phase, opened this operation in level 4, level 5, level 4, and level 3. At level 3, it was fully operational. That's why it is a leading sector in the reconstruction and recovery of the economy today for 4 quarters running. And the reason for that is because we cooperated with the industry, we cooperated with the workers in the sector. If we didn't do that, we would be doomed by day, and therefore the slogan of protecting lives and protecting livelihoods became a reality. And the fact that I refer to staff in Marikana that were closed by lawmen that are being reopened now is not a lark. It is because there are discussions, there's commitment to revitalize that area in terms of its economic activity.
Now, you yourself had said what happened in Marikana, in part, was because of the socio-economic conditions. Miners fighting for a living wage. Now, there's still abject poverty and squalor surrounding that area. In fact, you mentioned the housing project. Many of the miners say they see those houses, but those houses are not cheap. And so they opt to go and stay in informal settlements because they can't afford to stay in those houses that are built by those mines. Are we not creating much of the same thing and not actually moving from that experience that brought us to the massacre we saw in Marikana?
No, the reality is where there is economic activity, it's like a light, because when there's a light, butterflies fly into that light. Where there is economic activity, people who are unemployed and people who are in poverty will go to that area. And we must not actually curse that reality. We must all just think of innovative ways of dealing with the level of unemployment and poverty in the country. I took my time to read a book called China Emerging and looked at Deng Xiaoping opening up special economic zones that help people be innovative and take initiative. And I hope I can facilitate those in some areas. And we're discussing it, for example, in Marikana, which is in the Bujanala district, north of them, there is a special economic zone that has been declared called Mukhwasi. We are discussing what do we do in Mukhwasi to absorb part of the abject poverty that we see in the area. But it will depend on the people's willingness to be active participants.
By active participants, what do you mean?
That I'm prepared to open a small entity and grow it. I'm prepared to be given a contract to cut grass and become a leading cut grass and landscaper and expand that business to the area. I must be prepared to open up a fruit stall in the SEZ and grow it into a market. That is an active participant. You start small, you build it, you grow it, it takes your time, it absorbs your energy, and ultimately make you grow into a sizable entrepreneur.
There's a charge, Minister Mantashe, that there is no political will to ensure that justice is served in Marikana. If you look at the number of people who have been charged up until this point, it's actually none. There were 7 investigators when the investigation commenced. Now only 2 remain. There seems to be no seriousness to wrap this particular matter up. How do you respond to that? I know you're not in the police portfolio, but from a political point of view.
Now, the reality of the matter is that, you know, when we talk of Marikana half the time, we talk of 34 people who were killed on the day. We normally don't talk about the 10 who were hacked in the lead up to that day. And to my own view is that the full scale of justice must cover all 44. And the Department of Police and the Department of Justice and Criminal Service must get their head around the crisis and complication in Marikana. If we don't do that, they are going to make it difficult to mine. You know, when you are mining, we are dealing with rocks and try to study the behavior of rocks. But when people must be arrested and when people steal minerals, that becomes a crime scene. It is immediately transferred from you to a different ministry. And I agree that the processes must be accelerated.
Minister Mantashe, I appreciate your time and thank you for joining us tonight on In Focus. Gwede Mantashe, chairperson of the African National Congress and Minister in Government in the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. We'll continue.